The 50 most famous artworks by Pierre-Auguste Renoir. Number 50. Snowy Landscape. From 1870 to 1875. Between 1870 and 1875 AD, Snowy Landscape became one of the most important works of the Impressionist period. Conceived in a context where Europe was undergoing profound economic and cultural changes, this oil painting captures the essence of a sublime and silent nature. The painting, charged with an atmosphere of serenity and contemplation, reflects the artist's first forays into the plein air technique, where the effects of light and weather were depicted with absolute mastery. The author uses a palette dominated by white, blue, and gray tones, successfully conveying the sensation of intense cold enveloping the landscape. The brushstrokes are visible, with a loose and dynamic style, allowing the viewer to perceive both the texture of the snow and the subtle play of shadows created by the winter sunlight. The composition includes a snow-covered path that meanders towards the horizon, guiding the eye towards a group of bare trees, symbols of resistance to the harshness of winter. This work marked a turning point in the artist's career. Although he had already explored natural themes, Snowy Landscape consolidated his technical mastery and his ability to capture ephemeral moments. The reception of this work was initially discreet, but over time it became one of the most studied pieces by critics and admirers, who consider it a paradigmatic example of early Impressionism. As a curious fact, it is said that the author painted this scene during a snowstorm, facing adverse conditions to ensure the authenticity of the moment. This adds a level of admiration to the artistic commitment of the painter, whose sensitivity manages to transport us directly to the 19th century. Number 49. View of Venice. 1881. In the year 1881 AD, the View of Venice emerged as a tribute to the city of canals and its unparalleled splendor. Venice, known for its Renaissance architecture and romantic atmosphere, offered a perfect setting for the author to explore the reflections of the water and the changing nuances of light. This oil on canvas, characterized by its meticulous attention to detail, became a testament to the city's timeless beauty. The author uses warm colors, such as gold and ochre, to represent the light of the evening, while blue tones capture the serenity of the Venetian canals. The composition includes a panoramic view with gondolas gently gliding through the waters, while the facades of the palaces are reflected on the surface, creating a mirror effect that amplifies the magic of the landscape. The brushstrokes are more precise than in other works by the author, indicating a desire for realism without completely abandoning the fluidity characteristic of his style. This work is significant in the artist's career because it represents a moment of transition towards a more mature and consolidated stage. Although it maintained the Impressionist influences, there is a greater attention to detail and a search for a balance between emotion and technique. In its time, the View of Venice was celebrated in international exhibitions, consolidating the painter's reputation as a master of light. An interesting peculiarity of this work is that the author claimed to have captured the scene in a single afternoon, working from a balcony with a direct view of the Grand Canal. This detail highlights not only his technical skill, but also his deep connection with the landscapes he was portraying. Number 48. Ascending Path Through Tall Grass. 1876. In 1876 AD, a path ascending through tall grass was presented as a celebration of nature in its purest form. This work captures a path surrounded by lush vegetation, inviting the viewer to enter a world full of life and energy. Conceived in a period when the author sought to move away from urban environments, the painting reflects a deep appreciation for rural landscapes and their simplicity. The color palette is vibrant, dominated by deep greens mixed with hints of yellow and brown, evoking warm summer days. The brushstrokes are free and dynamic, creating a texture that simulates the movement of the wind over the grasses. At the center of the composition, the winding path becomes the protagonist, suggesting a feeling of ascent, both physical and emotional, towards a hidden horizon. This work is significant because it marks a moment when the author began to experiment with riskier perspectives and less conventional compositions. Although it received mixed reviews upon its debut, it was eventually recognized as an innovative work, influencing a generation of artists who sought to capture the interaction between man and nature. A fascinating fact is that the author confessed to having been inspired by a place he frequented during his childhood, which adds a layer of nostalgia to the work and reinforces his emotional connection with the landscape. Number 47. The Vineyards at Cagnes, 1908. In 1908 AD, the author presented The Vineyards at Cagnes, a work noted for its celebration of the Mediterranean landscape. This oil painting captures a scene where vineyards, bathed in sunlight, stretch out over rolling hills. The location, Cagnes-sur-Mer, was a place of retreat for the author, and this work reflects his love for the colors and textures of the region. The composition is characterized by its rich colors, with deep greens, terracotta tones, and a blue sky that evokes calm and eternity. The brushstrokes are broad and energetic, conveying the vitality of nature. Unlike other works by the author, here we can see a greater simplification of the forms, which allows the colors to be the absolute protagonists. In the context of his career, this work represents a period of experimentation and renewal. The author, already established, was looking for new forms of expression that would connect with his immediate surroundings. The Vineyards at Cagnes is one of the works that consolidated his reputation as a master of color and light. Curiously, the work was created during a period of physical recovery for the author, who found in painting a means to heal both body and spirit. Number 46. Reading, 1890. In 1890 AD, Reading became an emblematic work in the author's production. This painting, which represents a woman immersed in the reading of a book, stands out for its intimacy and its calm atmosphere. The scene, apparently simple, is full of details that reveal the author's mastery in capturing everyday moments. The central figure is surrounded by warm, soft tones, with a background that suggests natural light coming through a window. The contrast between the colors of the woman's dress and the surroundings creates a visual balance that draws attention to her hands and the book. The brushstrokes are delicate and precise, emphasizing the serenity of the moment. This work is significant in the author's career because it demonstrates his ability to find beauty in the everyday. The reading was well received by critics, who praised his ability to evoke universal emotions through an intimate and personal scene. As an additional detail, it is said that the book that appears in the work was one of the author's favorites, which adds an autobiographical and emotional touch to this piece. Number 45. Naked Woman Lying Down, 1907. Set in 1907, within the vibrant context of the artistic transformation of the 20th century, Reclining Nude Woman marked a milestone in the representation of the human body. This work reflects the transition between classical styles and experimentation with the avant-garde, at a time when art was beginning to break with established norms. Set at the height of the modernist movement, the painting captures the search for a visual language that would express intimacy, sensuality, and humanity in its purest form, moving away from the decorative conventions of the 19th century. The technique used reveals an exceptional mastery of oil on canvas, highlighting the contrast between the curved lines of the female body and the simplified background. The warm, earthy tones of the model's skin are complemented by soft shadows that generate a three-dimensional effect, while the background, reduced to loose strokes, emphasizes the main figure without distracting the viewer. The model's relaxed posture, combined with her enigmatic gaze, adds an element of introspection that elevates the piece beyond a simple physical representation, endowing it with a deep emotional charge. For the author, this work represents a crucial point in his career, consolidating his ability to innovate within traditional canons. Although it was initially received with mixed reviews, today it is recognized as a precursor to later studies on the human body in contemporary art. Its impact lies in the way it managed to capture the vulnerability and strength of the female figure, aspects that inspired generations of later artists. Interestingly, the composition of this work reveals a direct inspiration from Renaissance nudes, but reinterpreted through a modern lens. This dialogue between past and present becomes the heart of Reclining Nude Woman, showing how the roots of art can be reinvented without losing its timeless essence. Number 44. Still Life with Apples, 1890. In 1890, at the height of the Impressionism and Post-Impressionism era, Still Life with Apples emerged as a manifesto of simplicity and detail in a time of constant change in artistic perception. This work is part of a period of exploration, where artists experimented with the effects of light and color to represent everyday life from a new perspective. The technique applied in this painting is masterful. The brushstrokes are visible, free and dynamic, allowing each stroke of color to take on a life of its own. The apples, with their reddish, yellow and green tones, seem to pulsate on the canvas, while the soft, neutral background accentuates their prominence. The arrangement of the objects, seemingly casual but meticulously planned, achieves a perfect balance between harmony and movement. The artist, through the use of light and shadow, creates a depth that transports the viewer into the scene, inviting them to observe from different angles. In the author's career, this work symbolizes a consolidation of his technique and a transition towards a greater simplification of forms. Despite its apparent simplicity, Still Life with Apples is an example of how the ordinary can be made extraordinary through art. This painting not only influenced his contemporaries, but also resonated with future generations, who considered it an example of mastery in the treatment of still life. A notable feature of this work is the contrast between the freshness of the fruit and the apparent rusticity of the background, which evokes a sense of temporality. The choice of apples as a central motif connects with the universality of everyday objects, transforming them into symbols of eternal beauty. Number 43. Vase of Flowers, 1886. In 1886, at the heart of the 19th century, Vase of Flowers emerged as an exquisite representation of nature and its fragility. Framed in a context where artists sought to capture the ephemeral essence of everyday moments, this work stands out for its ability to convey life and movement through a seemingly static subject. The palette used in this painting combines pastel tones with vibrant accents, creating a visual balance that guides the viewer's gaze towards the center of the vase. The flowers, rendered in meticulous detail, seem to defy the limits of the canvas, stretching out into the viewer's space. Each petal, each leaf, is executed with precision, but without losing the spontaneity that characterizes the works of this period. In the author's career, Vase of Flowers is a testament to his ability to transform the simple into the sublime. Through this work, the painter consolidated his reputation as a master at capturing the transience of life, inspiring later artists to explore still life from an emotional and not just a technical perspective. Interestingly, The vase depicted is said to have been from the author's personal collection, which adds a layer of intimacy to the painting. This detail connects the viewer to the artist, reminding us that even great geniuses find beauty in the everyday. Number 42. Bouquet of Roses. 1879. In 1879, at the end of the 19th century, Bouquet of Roses was created as an ode to delicacy and romanticism. This painting reflects a moment of transition in the history of art, when artists began to move away from grandiloquent compositions to focus on the intimate and personal. The technique here is refined, with soft brushstrokes that seem to caress the canvas. The pink and white hues of the flowers intertwine with muted greens, creating a composition that exudes serenity. The use of light is particularly notable, as subtle shadows bring a sense of three-dimensionality that brings the bouquet to life. The arrangement of the roses in the center of the painting conveys an almost meditative balance, capturing the attention without overwhelming it. For the author, Bouquet of Roses marked a key moment in his artistic development, demonstrating his ability to evoke deep emotions through seemingly simple scenes. This work particularly resonated with an audience seeking a more direct connection with nature and human emotions. An intriguing detail is the choice of roses, traditionally associated with love and beauty, as the main subject. This not only underlines the artist's sensitivity, but also highlights his intention to capture the essence of what love represents in its purest form. Number 41. Still Life with Bouquet of Roses. 1870. In 1870, at the height of the Realism movement, Still Life with a Bouquet of Roses was presented as a work that combined technical precision with poetic sensitivity. In an era marked by social and artistic changes, this painting stood out for its ability to capture the beauty of small details, becoming a symbol of the connection between art and nature. The composition of the work is masterful. The bouquet of roses, placed in a glass vase, is surrounded by carefully arranged elements that frame and enhance its beauty. The flowers, depicted in minute detail, seem to pulsate with a life of their own, while the dark background adds drama that highlights the vivid colors of the petals. The technique used to represent the transparency of the vase is particularly impressive, demonstrating the author's mastery over the use of color and light. In the artist's career, this work symbolizes a commitment to faithful representation of reality, but without sacrificing emotion. Still Life with a Bouquet of Roses became a reference for other painters of his generation, who found in it a source of inspiration to explore still life as a high genre. A fascinating aspect of this painting is how the author manages to evoke a dialogue between life and mortality. The roses, fresh and vibrant, contrast with the static atmosphere of the composition, reminding us of the fleeting nature of beauty. This contrast becomes the soul of the work, elevating it to a timeless piece. Number 40. Two Bathers. From 1918 to 1919. Created in the years immediately following World War I, this work reflects Pierre-Auguste Renoir's stylistic transition toward a more serene and melancholic depiction of the human body. Set against the backdrop of the 20th century, Two Bathers is set in a period of search for peace and beauty following the ravages of global conflict. The female figures, depicted with robust bodies and idealized proportions, evoke a return to the classical values of harmony and naturalness that Renoir so admired. The choice of bathers, a recurring theme in his career, symbolizes a direct connection with nature, simplicity, and the enjoyment of everyday life. Technically, this painting stands out for its use of warm, vibrant colors, characteristic of the artist's late period. The soft, pink tones on the bather's skin contrast with the greens and blues that frame the landscape, creating an enveloping atmosphere. Renoir used delicate, fluid brushstrokes that give the figures an almost tactile texture, accentuating their three-dimensionality. The play of light and shadow is subtle, with a more diffuse approach than in his early works, demonstrating an artistic maturity that prioritizes expression over detail. In the field of art history, Two Bathers is considered an iconic work that sums up Renoir's evolution from Impressionism to modern classicism. Despite having been criticized for his departure from Impressionist principles, this final stage consolidated his legacy as a master who knew how to reinvent himself without losing his essence. The work also dialogues with the artistic tradition of classical painters such as Titian and Rubens, showing the influence of these great masters in the treatment of the female figure. An interesting fact is that Renoir completed this work despite the physical limitations he faced in his later years, when rheumatoid arthritis had reduced his mobility. This not only demonstrates his unwavering passion for painting, but also his ability to innovate and overcome personal adversities through his art. Number 39. La Toilette, 1885. Set in the last quarter of the 19th century, La Toilette marks a pivotal point in Pierre-Auguste Renoir's career, where the painter experiments with a stylistic transition more oriented towards precise drawing and structured composition. The work shows a woman in an intimate, everyday act, arranging herself in front of a mirror, encapsulating the artist's fascination with feminine beauty and the private moments of life. The subject matter reflects the influence of naturalism, an emerging cultural movement that sought to capture the authenticity of human existence without artifice. From a technical point of view, the painting stands out for its attention to detail in the folds of the fabrics and the textures of the environment, achieving a harmonious contrast between the model's body and the surrounding objects. Renoir uses a chromatic palette that combines neutral colors with touches of warm tones, emphasizing the softness of the female skin and the serenity of the moment. The brushstrokes are controlled, suggesting an influence from the old Renaissance masters and a departure from the spontaneity characteristic of pure Impressionism. La Toilette is not only an example of Renoir's technical mastery, but also of his ability to explore the intimate as a relevant artistic theme. By choosing to capture this moment of female introspection, the painter reaffirms his interest in the connection between the personal and the universal, an element that permeates much of his work. The depiction of the figure in a confined space also highlights his ability to create balanced compositions rich in emotional meaning. In retrospect, this work is considered a prelude to the stylistic changes that Renoir would consolidate throughout the 1880s. It also reveals his commitment to the search for new forms of artistic expression, which kept him current and relevant in an ever-changing artistic panorama. Number 38. Bather seated in a landscape, 1883. At the height of the Impressionist movement in the 19th century, seated bather in a landscape represents a synthesis of the elements that defined Renoir's style during this crucial stage of his career. The work shows a young woman seated in a natural setting, with a focus on the interaction between the human figure and the landscape that surrounds her. This composition, although apparently simple, is loaded with technical and symbolic complexity, reflecting the artist's interest in capturing the harmonious relationship between man and nature. Renoir uses a loose and vibrant brushstroke technique that allows for a luminous representation of the scene, particularly highlighting the quality of the light that bathes both the model and the surroundings. The choice of warm, earthy colors for the figure contrasts with the greens and blues of the landscape, creating a balanced and visually appealing composition. Unlike his later works, here we can see a greater spontaneity in execution, characteristic of early Impressionism. In historical terms, This painting falls within a period in which Renoir sought to differentiate himself from other Impressionists by focusing on themes that exalted the beauty and sensuality of the female figure. By choosing a landscape, the artist also paid homage to the French Romantic tradition, albeit reinterpreted under the light and atmosphere of Impressionism. This work therefore stands out not only for its aesthetic quality, but also for its relevance within the development of the Impressionist movement. Interestingly, Seated Bather in a Landscape was created during a period of technical exploration for Renoir, when he was still honing the techniques that would lead him to redefine his style in the following decade. This adds an additional layer of interest to the work, considering it a bridge between his Impressionist period and his evolution towards a renewed classicism. Number 37. Woman Seated in a Landscape. From 1895 to 1900. The turn into the 20th century marked a transformative period in Renoir's work, exemplified by Seated Woman in a Landscape, a painting that encapsulates the painter's artistic maturity during his later years of the 19th century. In this work, Renoir continues to explore his fascination with the female figure, placing her in a natural context that highlights both the serenity of the sitter and the visual richness of the surroundings. The technical treatment of the work reflects a combination of loose brushstrokes with a greater definition in the contours of the figure, evidencing Renoir's mastery of drawing and color. The composition is carefully balanced, with the woman as the main focus surrounded by a vibrant landscape that does not compete with her presence, but rather complements it. The warm tones of the skin and clothing are subtly contrasted with the greens and browns of the background, achieving a sense of visual harmony. From a historical perspective, this work is set in a time when Renoir was moving away from Impressionist principles to embrace a more classical and structured approach. This translates into a greater attention to anatomical details and a renewed interest in the monumentality of the human figure. At the same time, the inclusion of the landscape as a compositional element highlights his connection to the pictorial traditions of the past, reinterpreted through a modern lens. A remarkable detail is how Renoir manages to convey not only the physical beauty of the model, but also a sense of introspection and calm, characteristics that distinguish this work within his repertoire. This approach reflects his constant search to capture the essence of the human in all its facets. Number 36. Landscape of Britney. 1893. Landscape in Britney, painted in the last quarter of the 19th century, is presented as a work that celebrates the connection between nature and art in the context of rural France. Renoir, known primarily for his portraits and urban scenes, here offers an intimate and contemplative view of the Breton countryside, highlighting his versatility as a painter and his ability to capture the essence of a place with bold, colorful brushstrokes. The technique employed in this painting is characterized by an impressionistic approach to the use of light and color, with loose brushstrokes suggesting rather than defining the elements of the landscape. The deep greens of the trees, the ochre tones of the earth and the soft blue of the sky combine to create a vibrant yet tranquil atmosphere. Here Renoir demonstrates his mastery in the representation of atmosphere, managing to convey the humidity and freshness characteristic of the Brittany region. Historically, this work is set at a time when Renoir was exploring nature as a main theme, temporarily moving away from his portraits and scenes of modern life. Landscape of Brittany highlights his interest in capturing the timeless beauty of the places he visited, turning them into silent witnesses of his artistic skill and visual sensitivity. A curious detail about this painting is that it reflects the influence that Breton landscapes had on the work of several Impressionists, such as Monet and Pissarro, who were also captivated by the uniqueness of the region. Renoir, however, brings his own unique touch, focusing less on geographical accuracy and more on the feeling and emotion that the landscape evokes. Number 35. Portrait of Romaine Lacaux, 1864. In 1864, during the second half of the 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir painted Portrait of Romaine Lacaux. This work is set in a cultural context marked by the transition between academic movements and the new Impressionist trends that were emerging in France. Renoir, at this point in his career, was still exploring the traditional techniques that had dominated European painting for centuries. The portrait shows a young woman with a serene, almost introspective expression, surrounded by a warm atmosphere that highlights the intimacy of the scene. The work is a testament to Renoir's ability to capture detail with precision and sensitivity. In Portrait of Romaine Lacaux, the artist employs a realistic approach with soft brushstrokes that give the figure's skin a luminous texture. The use of color is subtle but effective, with warm tones and a limited palette accentuating the sitter's face and the clothing she wears. Renoir also demonstrates a remarkable understanding of the contrast of light and shadow, giving the portrait a three-dimensional depth that seems to bring the character to life. This work represents an early stage in Renoir's career, before he had fully embraced the Impressionist style for which he is known. However, there are already hints of his ability to capture emotion and humanity in his subjects. Through this portrait, Renoir not only captures the physical appearance of Romaine Lacaux, but also a fragment of her personality, an achievement that few artists of his time could match. An interesting fact about this work is that it shows the influence of classical portraits, but it also hints at the artistic revolution that was to come in the following years. Renoir never stopped experimenting and evolving, but Portrait of Romaine Lacaux remains a reminder of his artistic roots and his ability to explore the subtleties of the human condition from his earliest works. Number 34. Nini in the Garden, 1876. In 1876, at the height of the 19th century, Renoir presented Nini in the Garden, a work that reflects the artist's connection with nature and his predilection for portraying scenes of everyday life. This painting belongs to the period in which Renoir had already adopted Impressionism, a revolutionary movement that broke with academic rules and sought to capture the effects of light and atmosphere rather than rigid details. In Nini in the Garden, Renoir uses quick, visible brushstrokes to bring the landscape and the female figure within to life. Nini, probably a model close to the painter's circle, is surrounded by a vibrant natural setting, with flowers and vegetation that seem to move in the wind. The light that passes through the leaves of the garden reflects softly on her face and clothing, creating an ethereal and harmonious effect that captures the essence of Impressionism. This work is a prime example of Renoir's ability to integrate human figures into natural landscapes without losing focus. The warmth of the tones used for Nini's skin contrasts with the greens and yellows of the surroundings, while the loose, dynamic brushstrokes bring a unique energy to the scene. Renoir achieves a perfect balance between the depiction of the subject and the surrounding atmosphere, making the painting convey a sense of serenity and freshness. A fascinating aspect of Nini in the Garden is how Renoir transforms a seemingly mundane scene into a visual spectacle filled with emotion and life. This painting is a reminder of his talent for finding beauty in the simplest of moments, a trait that would come to define his artistic legacy. Number 33. The Rowers at Chatou, 1879. In 1879, during the last quarter of the 19th century, Renoir painted the boating party at Chatou, a work celebrating life and leisure on the banks of the river Seine. This painting captures a specific moment when outdoor activities and the enjoyment of free time were beginning to become part of French cultural identity. Renoir, like other Impressionists, was drawn to these scenes, seeing them as an opportunity to explore the interaction between people and their environment. The composition of this work is vibrant and full of movement. Renoir uses bright colors and loose brushstrokes to capture the dynamism of the rowers and the reflection of the water, while the clear sky adds a sense of spaciousness and freedom. The human figures, although not extremely detailed, are imbued with life and energy, showing the rowers in action as they enjoy the river landscape. This painting also stands out for its mastery of light and color. Renoir uses a palette that ranges from the blues and greens of the water and sky to the reds and yellows of the rowers' clothes, creating a visual contrast that draws the viewer's eye to the main elements of the scene. An interesting aspect of the rowers at Chatou is how Renoir combines the spontaneity of everyday life with carefully balanced composition. This work is a perfect example of how Impressionism managed to transform ordinary moments into artistic representations full of depth and meaning. Number 32. The Seine at Asnieres, 1879. In 1879, Pierre-Auguste Renoir painted the Seine at Asnieres, a landscape that captures the natural beauty and serenity of the river Seine at one of its calmest moments. This work is set within the context of Impressionism, a movement that sought to depict the atmosphere and ephemeral sensations of nature through rapid brushstrokes and a close attention to the effects of light. In this painting, Renoir focuses on the interplay between water, sky, and vegetation. He uses soft tones and exceptional color handling to show the reflections of the water, which appear to subtly move in the sunlight. The loose, visible brushstrokes add a rich, vibrant texture that brings the scene to life, while the overall composition conveys a sense of calm and balance. What makes the Seine at Asnieres unique is its ability to evoke an emotional connection with nature. Renoir manages to capture not only the physical appearance of the river and its surroundings, but also the atmosphere and the feeling of being there, watching the landscape come to life under the effects of the changing light. It is fascinating how Renoir manages to transform a seemingly simple landscape into a masterpiece full of nuance and emotion. This painting is a brilliant example of his ability to find beauty in the smallest details and to convey that beauty through his art. Number 31. The Wave, 1879. In 1879, Renoir painted The Wave, a work notable for its focus on the forces of nature and its ability to capture the energy and movement of the ocean. Created at a time when Impressionism was at its height, this painting demonstrates how Renoir could apply the principles of this movement even to less common subjects in his repertoire, such as seascapes. In The Wave, Renoir uses a color palette that includes blue, green, and white hues to depict the dynamism of water. The brushstrokes are quick and fluid, evoking the constant motion of waves as they crash against the shore. The sky, though serene compared to the sea, adds an interesting contrast that balances the composition and enhances the sense of movement in the scene. Unlike many of his works that focus on human figures, The Wave places the emphasis on nature and its force. Renoir shows his ability to capture the energy of an ephemeral moment, transforming the agitation of the ocean into an image full of life and power. A remarkable detail of The Wave is how Renoir manages to convey a sense of immensity and movement on a relatively small canvas. This work is a testament to his ability to adapt to different themes and to explore new forms of artistic expression, while always maintaining his unmistakable Impressionist touch. Number 30. Girl with Fan, 1880. In 1880, during the rise of Impressionism in the 19th century, a work emerged that captured the elegance and introspection of childhood, Girl with a Fan. This portrait was made by Pierre-Auguste Renoir, one of the greatest exponents of French Impressionism. The painting reflects an atmosphere of calm and contemplation, in which a girl holds a decorative fan, a symbol of sophistication and fashion of the time. The fan, painted with great attention to detail, contrasts with the soft, vaporous lines that make up the young girl's dress, making both elements complement each other in perfect harmony. The technique used by Renoir in this work demonstrates his mastery in the use of light and color. The warm tones and golden reflections that illuminate the girl's face manage to convey a feeling of warmth and proximity, elements characteristic of Impressionism. Looking closely, the use of short and free brushstrokes is evident, giving an almost ethereal effect to the surroundings, without losing focus on the girl's face, which is presented with a delicate and thoughtful expression. This work stands out in Renoir's career for its emphasis on intimacy and emotional connection. It represents not only a technical study of the human figure, but also a portrait of everyday life, a recurring theme in the artist's work. In addition, the fan as an accessory reinforces the idea of Oriental influence in Europe during that period, a detail that demonstrates how the cultural currents of the time were reflected in art. A fascinating detail is the way Renoir makes the fabric of the dress appear light and translucent, contrasting with the solidity of the fan. This technical mastery not only demonstrates his talent, but also positions Girl with Fan as one of the most emblematic works of his late period. Number 29. Le Pont Neuf, 1872. In 1872, the 19th century witnessed the creation of a work that captured the dynamism and vitality of Parisian life, Le Pont Neuf. Camille Pissarro, one of the founders of Impressionism, captured in this painting the essence of one of the most iconic bridges in Paris. In this canvas, Pissarro portrays not just an architectural structure, but a microcosm of urban life in constant motion. The composition of the work is marked by aerial perspective, which allows the viewer to observe the bridge in its entirety, with its lively streets and people passing by in carriages or on foot. Pissarro employs his characteristic use of short, juxtaposed brushstrokes to capture the interaction of light and atmosphere, managing to convey the bustle and energy of the city without losing detail in the architectural elements. The impact of Le Pont Neuf on Pissarro's career is significant, as it represents his interest in everyday life and the transformation of modernity in the urban landscape. Through this work, the artist manages to document not only the bridge as a structure, but also its role as a center of activity and connection in Parisian life. The attention to detail in the shadows cast by the buildings and the reflection of light on the water of the river Seine is one of the most captivating aspects of the work. This play of light and shadow not only enriches the composition, but also reveals Pissarro's ability to capture fleeting moments with almost photographic precision. Number 28. Little Irene, 1880. In 1880, Renoir created a portrait that immortalized the innocence and sweetness of childhood, Little Irene. This painting, created at the height of the Impressionist movement, is characterized by its warm color palette and its meticulous attention to detail, especially in the face of the young Irene d'Anvers, who was the model for this work. Irene's face is illuminated by a soft light that highlights her rosy cheeks and wavy brown hair, captured with a masterful technique that combines precise strokes with loose brushstrokes. Renoir manages to convey a sense of tenderness and serenity, creating a direct connection between the figure of the girl and the viewer. The background, composed of blurred tones, allows the main figure to stand out even more. This work marked a milestone in Renoir's career, cementing him as a master of portraiture. Little Irene not only celebrates childlike beauty, but also reflects the social tensions of the time, as Irene's family belonged to the financial elite of Paris. This social context adds a layer of meaning to the work, as it represents a fusion of art and culture in a period of significant change. One of the most captivating details of this painting is the way Renoir manages to capture the texture of the dress, using a contrast of tones that seem almost palpable. This technical and emotional mastery makes La Petite Irene a jewel of Impressionism. Number 27. Woman with Mandolin, 1919. In 1919, Pablo Picasso, already established as one of the most innovative artists of the 20th century, created Woman with Mandolin, a work that reflects his transition to neoclassicism after years of Cubist experimentation. This painting captures a female figure holding a mandolin, a traditional musical instrument, and combines elements of realism and abstraction in perfect synchronicity. The figure of the woman is presented with stylized proportions, typical of Picasso's approach at this stage. Earth tones and soft tones predominate, creating an atmosphere of calm and melancholy. The mandolin, although simplified in its form, becomes the focal point of the work, standing out for its contrast of curved and straight lines. The relevance of Woman with Mandolin lies in its historical and personal context. After the First World War, many artists, including Picasso, began to seek out more traditional forms of artistic expression as a means of reconnecting with European cultural roots. This work is a clear example of how Picasso was able to fuse the modernity of his techniques with respect for classical forms. A fascinating aspect of this work is how, despite its visual simplicity, it manages to convey a complex sense of introspection. The woman's posture and lost gaze suggest an internal narrative, a detail that invites the viewer to interpret the figure's emotional state. Number 26. Young Woman Crocheting, 1875. In 1875, Edgar Degas, known for his focus on capturing scenes of everyday life, presented Young Woman Crocheting, a work that combines his interest in the human figure and his ability to capture moments of introspection. The painting depicts a seated woman, concentrating on her work, with her hands busy with the delicate work of knitting. Degas' technique in this work is especially notable. He uses a warm color palette and a focus on textures to highlight both the delicacy of the fabric and the serenity of the moment. Loose brushstrokes and subtle nuances in lighting create an intimate atmosphere, allowing the viewer to feel like a privileged witness to the scene. The choice of subject is not accidental, as it reflects Degas' interest in documenting everyday activities and, at the same time, exploring the relationship between manual labor and creativity. At a time when women were beginning to redefine their roles in society, this work can also be interpreted as a tribute to dedication and craftsmanship. A fascinating detail is how Degas plays with the composition to guide the viewer's gaze towards the woman's hands, which become the center of the visual narrative. This focus on detail makes Young Woman Crocheting a work that transcends the everyday to celebrate the connection between art and life. Number 25. Roses in a Vase, 1892. In 1892 AD, the art world was in transition to an era of greater experimentation and creative freedom, marked by the consolidation of the Impressionist movement. Roses in a Vase is a perfect example of the technical mastery of its author, who managed to capture the delicacy of nature in an intimate and captivating format. This work, done in oil on canvas, stands out for the softness of the transition of colors, where the pink and white tones of the petals contrast delicately with the green of the leaves and the vase that holds them. The cultural context of the late 19th century allowed artists to explore new ways of depicting light and color, a characteristic that defines this painting. Rather than depicting the precise details of each petal, the author opted for a technique of short, precise brushstrokes that create a sense of vibration and movement. This unique style, associated with Impressionism, seeks to capture the fleetingness of the moment and evoke emotions through the intimate observation of an everyday item. The relevance of this work in the author's career lies in its ability to transform a seemingly simple subject into an icon of artistic sensitivity. This vase of roses not only represents a floral composition, but also symbolizes the connection between art and life, a revolutionary perspective for its time. In addition, the choice of the vase, with minimalist but powerful details, adds a visual balance that demonstrates the author's ability to combine technique and creativity. Interestingly, some critics have pointed out that the depiction of flowers could contain symbolic messages related to the ephemeral beauty of life. This work, although small in scale, continues to be an iconic piece that inspires generations of artists and art admirers. Number 24. Portrait of Alphonsine Fornays, 1879. Painted in 1879 AD, the Portrait of Alphonsine Fornays is a masterpiece that captures the essence of Impressionism at its peak. Alphonsine Fornays, known for her grace and elegance, was the daughter of a renowned restaurateur on the island of Chatou, where artists of the time used to gather. This portrait stands out not only for the beauty of its model, but also for the relaxed and natural atmosphere that surrounds the scene. The technique used in this work highlights the author's ability to capture light and the texture of materials. The dynamic strokes and soft chromatic transitions create a play between the warm tones of Alphonsine's skin and the contrast of the background colors, possibly inspired by the natural surroundings of the island's gardens. The author manages to perfectly balance the realism in the details of the face with a freer and more ethereal background, typical of Impressionism. Culturally, this work represents a key moment in art history, when artists sought to move away from academic restrictions and capture scenes of everyday life with a more emotional and subjective vision. Alphonsine is not portrayed as an idealized figure, but as a woman of flesh and blood, with a warm and charismatic presence that reflects the author's intention to capture her real essence. The portrait, besides being a demonstration of the author's technical skill, represents a collaboration between art and the social life of the time. Alphonsine, as a recurring muse, became an iconic figure within the works of this period, leaving a legacy that transcends its time. Number 23. Fog in Guernsey, 1883. The year 1883 AD marked a period of great creative activity in the author's life, and Fog in Guernsey is one of his most evocative works. Inspired by the misty atmosphere of the island of Guernsey, this painting captures the interplay between nature and light in a sublime way. The fog, depicted in soft shades of gray and white, envelops the coastal landscape, blurring the contours and creating a sense of mystery and serenity. In the context of the 19th century, seascapes were a recurring theme, but the author manages to reinvent this tradition by focusing on the atmospheric qualities of the place. The technique of broad, light brushstrokes suggests the movement of fog as it blends with the sea and sky, creating a composition in which the boundaries between elements seem to disappear. This approach, characteristic of late Impressionism, invites the viewer to immerse themselves in a unique sensory experience. The work reflects the artist's fascination with changing landscapes and weather conditions, themes he repeatedly addressed throughout his career. His ability to capture light at different times of the day and his subjective interpretation of nature give him a prominent place in art history. Interestingly, it is said that the work was made during a trip in which the author sought inspiration in isolated environments, which contributed to the introspective atmosphere of the painting. Number 22. Claude Renoir playing. 1905. In 1905 AD, the work Claude Renoir at Play became a tribute to the world of childhood through the Impressionist gaze. This portrait of the author's son, Claude Renoir, captures the innocence and carefree energy of a child in his natural environment. The warm, golden light that bathes the scene reflects the emotional connection between the artist and his model. Technically, the work stands out for its loose and vibrant brushwork, which gives life and movement to each element. Claude's blonde hair seems to shine under the light, while the background, composed of green and blue tones, harmoniously frames the child. This chromatic balance, together with the softness of the shadows, contributes to a visually striking composition. Culturally, this painting represents a shift in the perception of childhood within art. The author, known for his family portraits, uses this theme to explore the intimacy and happiness he finds in his personal life. The work transcends the personal and becomes a universal testimony to paternal love and the beauty of everyday moments. As a curiosity, Claude Renoir himself recalled years later how he posed for his father on numerous occasions, leaving a tangible legacy of his childhood. Number 21. In the Garden. 1885. Created in 1885 AD, the work In the Garden transports the viewer to a space of tranquility and harmony with nature. The author, known for his predilection for gardens and outdoor scenes, captures in this painting the connection between human beings and their natural environment. The scene shows a woman sitting on a bench, surrounded by lush vegetation, with flowers in full bloom that seem to sprout from the canvas. The handling of light in this work is exceptional, with sun rays filtering through the leaves and falling softly on the protagonist's face. The short, quick brushstrokes create a texture that gives life to the foliage, while the warm tones of the woman's dress contrast with the intense greens of the garden, creating a visual balance. In the context of his career, this work represents a high point in the author's exploration of capturing the essence of natural spaces. The garden, more than just a setting, becomes a symbol of peace and contemplation, a place where life develops in its fullest plenitude. A striking fact about this painting is that it was created in the author's personal garden, which adds a touch of intimacy and authenticity to the work. The painting remains an emblematic example of the connection between Impressionism and nature. Number 20. The Reader, 1876. In 1876, during the 19th century, one of Pierre-Auguste Renoir's most representative works emerged, entitled The Reader. This oil on canvas is set in a historical context marked by the rise of Impressionism, an artistic movement that sought to break with the academic traditions of art. The 19th century witnessed social and cultural transformations that influenced the vision of artists, who began to explore everyday themes with a more naturalistic approach. The Reader captures a young woman immersed in reading, representing a moment of intimate and peaceful introspection that resonated with the ideals of the Impressionist movement. Technically, the work stands out for its masterful use of color and light. Renoir manages to bring the canvas to life through loose, vibrant brushstrokes, which lend dynamism to the scene without sacrificing the softness of the details. The contrast between the warm tones of the reader's dress and the softer shades of the background creates a harmonious atmosphere, while the texture of the young woman's hair and the delicate lines on her face reflect the artist's ability to convey emotions. The naturalness of the reader's posture, with her head bowed and her gaze fixed on the book, evokes an authentic and private moment. This work also symbolizes Renoir's penchant for portraying everyday scenes and female characters in their utmost grace. Through the reader, the artist manages to capture the essence of femininity in a respectful and elegant manner, cementing his place as one of the most sensitive and humane painters of Impressionism. This painting, though seemingly simple in its subject matter, exemplifies Renoir's artistic genius in turning a trivial moment into an extraordinary visual experience. Interestingly, the reader reflects not only Renoir's artistry, but also his affinity for everyday moments that often went unnoticed. This detailed and contemplative approach has meant that works like this continue to be studied and admired, not only for their aesthetic beauty, but for the background they represent within a time of momentous change in art. Number 19. Girl Combing Her Hair, 1894. In 1894, towards the end of the 19th century, Renoir presented one of his most emblematic works, Girl Combing Her Hair. This period marked a stylistic maturity for the painter, who began to further refine his impressionist technique while exploring the treatment of the human figure. Girl Combing Her Hair depicts a young woman in an intimate moment, captured with a naturalness that defies the conventions of formal portraiture. Such domestic depictions were in line with Renoir's growing fascination with scenes of everyday life. From a technical point of view, the work is characterized by the precision with which Renoir captures the effects of light on the young woman's skin and hair. The warm tones that predominate on the canvas create a feeling of closeness and tenderness, while the loose brushstrokes give dynamism and life to the scene. The texture of the hair, meticulously rendered, contrasts with the softness of the skin, highlighting the artist's ability to balance different elements within a single canvas. The background, barely suggested, allows the main figure to stand out clearly. In this painting, Renoir reaffirms his preference for portraying women as symbols of grace and delicacy, using simple and expressive gestures to convey deep emotions. Beyond technique, Girl Combing Her Hair is a testament to the artist's interest in capturing ephemeral and universal moments that transcend cultural and temporal barriers. A curious detail is how Renoir manages to make the viewer a discreet observer of this private moment, which adds a level of intimacy that few artists of his time managed to match. This focus on the everyday and emotional connection cemented his place as one of the great masters of Impressionism. Number 18. The Walk, 1870. Created in 1870, The Walk is a work that encapsulates the ideals of Impressionism in full development during the second half of the 19th century. This painting depicts a couple walking through a natural setting, a recurring theme in Renoir's early explorations of the interaction between human figures and the landscape. The 19th century witnessed a growing appreciation for nature, and Renoir took advantage of this context to capture the beauty of moments shared outdoors. In terms of technique, The Walk stands out for its luminous atmosphere, achieved through agile brushstrokes and a color palette that emphasizes the green and gold tones of the surroundings. The lighting of the painting seems to envelop the protagonists, creating an effect of unity between them and the surrounding nature. Renoir shows remarkable attention to detail in the characters' clothing, whose texture contrasts delicately with the fluidity of the landscape. The significance of this work lies in its ability to convey a sense of serenity and human connection, characteristics that defined much of Renoir's early work. The promenade not only captures a romantic moment, but also reflects the artist's desire to highlight the importance of human interactions in an increasingly industrialized world. A curious fact is how Renoir manages to give the landscape a leading role, complementing and framing the characters instead of relegating it to the background. This symbiotic relationship between the environment and the human figures anticipates many of the developments that would define his later career. Number 17. Madame Charpentier and Her Children, 1878. In 1878, Renoir reached a milestone in his career with the creation of Madame Charpentier and Her Children. This family portrait, made during the 19th century, marked a turning point in his career by establishing him as one of the most sought-after portrait painters of his time. Commissioned by the Charpentier family, art patrons, and influential publishers, this work captures the sophistication and social status of the family, while retaining the characteristic style of Impressionism. The technique employed by Renoir in this work is impeccable. Every detail, from the textures of the dresses to the nuances of the furniture, is carefully crafted to highlight the richness of the scene without falling into excessive ostentation. The soft, diffused light plays a crucial role in giving warmth and life to the characters. Madame Charpentier and her children are arranged in a balanced composition that conveys both family closeness and elegance. This painting represents a change in approach for Renoir, who combined Impressionist principles with a level of detail more in keeping with the academic tradition. This allowed him to reach a wider audience without compromising the essence of his style. An interesting fact about this work is how Renoir manages to make the characters seem accessible and human, despite the obvious luxury that surrounds them. This balance between the everyday and the extraordinary was key to Renoir's success as a portraitist. Number 16. Gabrielle with a Rose, 1911. In 1911, in the middle of the 20th century, Renoir presented Gabrielle with a Rose, a work that combines the intimacy characteristic of his work with a more mature palette rich in nuances. Gabrielle Renard, one of the painter's most frequent and closest models, appears in this work holding a rose, a recurring symbol in his art. The piece stands out for the personal connection it reflects between the artist and his model, as well as for the delicacy with which Renoir portrays femininity. Technically, the work displays an absolute mastery of color and texture. Warm tones predominate, creating a welcoming atmosphere that envelops the central figure. Gabrielle's skin seems to vibrate with life thanks to the loose, fluid brushwork that characterizes Renoir's mature style. The rose, painted in detail, adds a touch of vibrant color that contrasts delicately with the soft tones of the figure. Gabrielle with a Rose represents a high point in Renoir's career, cementing his reputation as a master of intimate portraiture. This painting not only celebrates the beauty of its subject, but also the artist's ability to capture the essence of those who sat for him. A curious aspect of this work is how Renoir manages to convey a sense of closeness and familiarity, making the viewer feel as if he is looking at someone he knows. This detail reflects Renoir's deep understanding of human emotions, which remains a distinctive feature throughout his work. Number 15. Woman with a Parasol in a Garden, 1875. In 1875, in the middle of the 19th century, the work, Woman with a Parasol in a Garden, emerged, one of the most outstanding pieces by Claude Monet, who is recognized as one of the pillars of Impressionism. This period marked a radical change in art, leaving behind the idealized representations of Romanticism to embrace a more natural and fleeting perspective. The work captures an elegantly dressed woman, holding a parasol that casts soft shadows on her face. The garden, painted with short and vibrant brushstrokes, reflects the author's fascination with the interaction between light, shadow, and movement. Monet, influenced by the beauty of French landscapes, manages to transmit a feeling of calm that envelops the viewer. From a technical point of view, Monet uses light colors and an oil technique that emphasizes the texture of the canvas. The composition focuses on the female figure, but the focus is on the atmosphere, where sun reflections and shadows play a vital role. The quick and seemingly messy brushstrokes create a sense of life, as if the air itself were permeated with color. The use of green, yellow, and blue tones shows the artist's ability to capture the vibrancy of nature at a precise instant. This painting symbolizes a key moment in Monet's career, as it was created at a time when he was seeking to establish his distinctive style within Impressionism. The work not only reflects his talent, but also his tireless dedication to portraying nature from a novel perspective. Woman with a Parasol in a Garden has profoundly influenced the way Western art depicts light and space, cementing its place in art history. A fascinating detail is how Monet turns an everyday moment into something extraordinary. The subtle shadows of the parasol and the relaxed posture of the woman invite the viewer to immerse themselves in the scene and experience the tranquility of a day in the garden. Number 14. The Hat with a Pin. 1894. In 1894, in the 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir offered us The Hat with a Pin, one of his most representative works of the Impressionist period. In this piece, Renoir shows a young woman wearing a hat decorated with a pin, highlighting his attention to detail and ability to capture the fashion of the time. The delicacy with which the woman's face is portrayed, along with the focus on the nuances of light on her skin, makes this work a notable example of the search for idealized beauty in the small things of everyday life. Renoir uses soft colors and a rich pastel palette, achieving an almost velvety texture in the fabrics and hat. The artist's oil painting technique brings natural light to life, which seems to dance across the young woman's face and in the folds of the hat. The careful, fluid brushstrokes demonstrate a technical mastery that combines precision with spontaneity, characteristics that have made Renoir admired for generations. This painting marks an important point in the artist's career, who by then had consolidated his distinctive style. In a period where Impressionism was beginning to evolve into new forms, Renoir was reaffirming his commitment to the representation of beauty and humanity. The Hat with a Pin not only celebrates the aesthetics of its time, but also highlights the role of fashion as an expression of identity in the 19th century. A curious fact is that Renoir manages to endow the pin, an apparently trivial element, with an almost symbolic importance. His attention to this small detail turns a common accessory into a central component of the work, demonstrating the artist's mastery in transforming the ordinary into something extraordinary. Number 13. Dancing in the Country. 1883. In 1883, in the middle of the 19th century, Renoir created Dance in the Country, a work that captures the joy of life outdoors with a unique warmth. This painting portrays a couple dancing in a natural setting, filled with vegetation and golden lights. Renoir, a master at depicting intimate and vibrant moments, manages to encapsulate an atmosphere of celebration and happiness in this painting. The pose of the dancers, combined with the movement of the fabrics and the nuances of light, conveys a sense of dynamism that seems to transcend the canvas. Technically, the work stands out for the light brushstrokes and bright colors that dominate the composition. Renoir employs a warm palette with yellow, red, and green tones, which enhance the liveliness of the scene. The texture of the canvas and the details on the characters' faces show a balance between characteristic impressionism and a touch of realism. The choice of a natural setting also reinforces the central theme of the connection between people and nature. This painting is part of a group of works that Renoir dedicated to the theme of dance, showing different contexts and emotions. Dance in the Country contrasts with its counterpart, Dance in the City, by highlighting the freshness and spontaneity of rural life. It is a work that demonstrates the artist's ability to capture the essence of the moment, making it eternal. A captivating detail is how Renoir uses the light that passes through the leaves to create a play of shadows that seem to dance to the rhythm of the protagonists. This effect not only enriches the composition, but also adds emotional depth to the scene. Number 12. Dance in the City, 1883. In 1883, in the 19th century, Renoir presents Ball in the City, a work that contrasts elegantly with Ball in the Country. Here, the scene takes place in an enclosed salon, where a couple dances in a formal and sophisticated setting. Renoir captures the grace and refinement of urban society at the time, using more sober colors and subdued lighting that accentuate the intimate nature of the scene. The couple, dressed in formal attire, becomes the center of attention, surrounded by a subtle background that highlights their prominence. The technique used in this work reflects Renoir's artistic maturity. The brushstrokes, although soft and fluid, show absolute control in the representation of details. The contrast between the light tones of the skin and the dark colors of the clothes adds depth to the composition. The artificial light in the living room creates a cozy atmosphere, where every element seems to be carefully calculated to evoke elegance. Dance in the City represents a more refined facet of Impressionism, focusing on human interaction within a social context. This work, along with Dance in the Country, establishes a visual dialogue that explores the different expressions of joy and love in different environments. Renoir thus demonstrates his ability to adapt his style to diverse atmospheres without losing the essence of his art. A fascinating aspect is how Renoir manages to convey emotions through the posture and looks of the characters, creating a visual narrative that invites the viewer to imagine the story behind the dance. Number 11. Lise with a Parasol, 1867. In 1867, in the 19th century, Renoir painted Lise with a Parasol, one of his earliest masterpieces that captures the beauty of his then muse and companion, Lise Tréhaut. In this painting, Renoir portrays Lise holding a parasol in a natural setting, highlighting his ability to capture the interaction between humans and nature. The composition conveys a unique serenity, with a focus on the female figure that highlights her grace and elegance. From a technical point of view, Renoir uses warm colors and soft brushstrokes that bring the canvas to life. The parasol, a recurring element in his works, plays a key role in adding depth and dynamism to the scene. The texture of the dress and the reflections of light on Lise's skin show meticulous detail, typical of an artist in the midst of exploring his style. Lise with a Parasol marks a milestone in Renoir's career, as it represents a moment when he begins to define his artistic identity within Impressionism. The work not only celebrates feminine beauty, but also reflects the artist's emotional connection with his muse, which adds a layer of personal meaning to the painting. An intriguing detail is how Renoir uses the parasol to play with shadows and highlight the luminosity of Lise's face, creating a contrast that adds depth to the work and underlines the delicacy of her expression. Number 10. Young Girls Playing the Piano, 1892. In 1892, during the 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir created Young Girls Playing the Piano, one of his most representative works of the Impressionist movement. This painting reflects the serenity and warmth of everyday moments that Renoir sought to immortalize, focusing on the intimacy of bourgeois life at the time. Set in an elegantly decorated domestic space, the painting shows two young women sitting around a piano, a scene that conveys both tenderness and harmony. Renoir's signature use of soft, warm colors highlights the texture of the dresses, hair, and objects in the environment, creating an ethereal atmosphere that seems to envelop the figures. Renoir applied his signature technique of loose, vibrant brushstrokes, making the light appear to dance across the surface of the canvas. This gives a sense of movement and liveliness that contrasts with the apparent stillness of the scene. The artist perfectly balances light tones with darker details in the background, drawing attention to the central figures. This work marked a key moment in Renoir's career, as it was part of a state commission that sought to promote Impressionist art in France. The piece was widely praised for its ability to combine technical beauty with an accessible and charming subject matter. It also symbolizes Renoir's interest in capturing human interaction in its most authentic forms, especially in cultural activities such as music. An interesting detail about this painting is that Renoir captured in it his optimistic view of life, where art and music occupy an essential place in personal and family development. This approach contributed to his popularity and consolidated his legacy as one of the great masters of Impressionism. Young Girls Playing the Piano remains one of the most beloved and studied works, standing out not only for its technical excellence, but also for the warmth that emanates from each brushstroke. Number 9. The Swing, 1876. In 1876, Pierre-Auguste Renoir presented The Swing, a work that embodies the joy and spontaneity of outdoor life. Set in the gardens of Montmartre, the painting captures a fleeting moment in which a young woman enjoys a ride on a swing while several characters surround her, engaged in conversation and curious glances. This piece reflects Renoir's interest in capturing the social interaction and carefree fun characteristic of his time. Renoir's Impressionist technique is evident in his use of bright colors and light brushstrokes that mimic the way sunlight filters through foliage. The warm tones of the young woman's dress and the softness of the green background enhance the festive atmosphere of the scene. Furthermore, the use of shadows and reflections creates a sense of depth and movement, transporting the viewer into the heart of this lively gathering. The Swing stands out in Renoir's career not only for its impeccable technical execution, but also for its ability to portray the effervescence of modern life. This work was exhibited at the Third Impressionist exhibition, receiving praise for its vivacity and the artist's ability to capture the details of human interaction. Renoir succeeds in conveying the spirit of an era in which parks and gardens became spaces for recreation and encounter. A curious aspect of this painting is that the man in the background, dressed in blue, is believed to be a self-portrait of Renoir, who used to subtly integrate himself into his compositions. This detail adds a personal dimension to the work, making The Swing a window not only to the outside world, but also to the artist's own life. Number 8. Two Sisters, 1881. In 1881, in the 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir painted Two Sisters, also known as On the Terrace. This intimate portrait shows two female figures, presumably sisters, sitting on a terrace surrounded by flowers, with a river meandering in the background. The scene evokes a bucolic tranquility, symbolizing family connection and the beauty of shared moments. Renoir used a warm, vibrant palette to bring the figures and their surroundings to life. Soft, flowing brushstrokes highlight the delicacy of the faces and the texture of the dresses. At the same time, the contrast of the dark tones of the background with the bright colors of the flowers and the hat of the older girl creates a balanced and visually captivating composition. This work reflects Renoir's ability to capture both physical detail and emotional atmosphere. The work was conceived during a stay in Paris, at a period when Renoir was beginning to incorporate more defined elements into his portraits, moving slightly away from the pure spontaneity of early Impressionism. This marked an important transition in his style, broadening his artistic repertoire and consolidating his international reputation. Two Sisters was exhibited at the Paris Salon, where it was acclaimed for its combination of technique and sensitivity. A curious fact is that the place where this scene was painted, Maison Fournaise, was a popular restaurant among the Impressionists. This connects the work with other emblematic paintings of the movement, establishing a link between everyday life and the art that so defined this era. Number 7. Portrait of Jean Samary, 1877. In 1877, in the 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir painted Portrait of Jean Samary, an exquisite example of his talent for portraiture. Jean Samary, an actress at the Comédie Française, poses in an intimate setting, wearing a green dress that highlights her beauty and vibrant personality. The work is a testament to Renoir's interest in capturing not only the physical appearance, but also the character and essence of his subjects. The use of bright colors and soft brushstrokes is especially noticeable in this painting. Renoir plays with light to highlight Jean's features, creating a sense of vitality and proximity. The background, composed of warm and subtle tones, complements the central figure without distracting the viewer's attention. This portrait is a perfect example of how Renoir fuses Impressionist technique with a more detailed and refined approach. The choice of Jean Samary as a model was not accidental. Renoir admired her talent and charisma, and this work consolidated his ability to portray female figures in a way that transcended the purely visual. The portrait was exhibited at the Paris Salon, where it received praise for its innovative style and its ability to convey complex emotions. An interesting detail is that Jean Samary was portrayed by Renoir on several occasions, which demonstrates the relationship of trust and mutual admiration between the actress and the painter. This bond is reflected in the warmth and humanity that emanate from each brushstroke, making this portrait one of the most beloved works of Impressionism. Number 6. The Box, 1874. In 1874, 19th century, Pierre-Auguste Renoir presented The Box, a work that captures the sophistication and dynamism of Parisian life. The painting shows a couple in a theater box, with the woman as the central figure, elegantly dressed in a white dress and holding a fan. Her expression and posture denote a mix of interest and detachment, while the man behind her looks out at the audience, adding a narrative element to the composition. Renoir used a rich, contrasting palette to highlight the details of the scene, from the texture of the dress to the sparkle of the jewelry. Loose, luminous brushstrokes create a vibrant atmosphere, while the use of light and shadow adds depth and realism. The composition reflects Renoir's technical mastery and his ability to capture both the fashion and attitude of high society of the time. The Box was part of the first Impressionist exhibition in Paris, where it stood out for its innovative representation of a modern social environment. The work consolidated Renoir as one of the main exponents of Impressionism, showing his ability to combine portraiture with genre scenes. An interesting fact is that The Box was painted at a time when the theater was a status symbol and a place of social interaction, which adds a layer of cultural context to the work. This painting not only captures a moment in time, but also invites the viewer to reflect on the relationship between art, fashion, and society. Number 5. Umbrellas, from 1881 to 1886 AD. The Umbrellas, one of Renoir's most distinctive works, reflects his ability to adapt and evolve in a changing artistic context. Begun in 1881 and completed in 1886, this painting encapsulates two stylistic periods of his career. The left half of the painting features impressionistic characteristics, such as loose brushstrokes and vibrant colors, while the right half, created later, displays a more classical approach, with defined contours and detailed modeling. The painting depicts an everyday scene on a rainy day in Paris, with figures sheltered under umbrellas that seem to form a geometric pattern in the composition. Renoir manages to capture the interaction between people and the urban environment with great skill, displaying a palette dominated by blues and grays that reinforce the melancholic atmosphere. The inclusion of children and female figures emphasizes the humanity of the scene, offering a contrast between the bustle of the crowd and the introspective calm of the characters. In terms of significance, the umbrellas marks a turning point in Renoir's career, as it reflects his transition from Impressionism to a more structured and academic style. This work demonstrates his ability to combine techniques and styles in innovative ways, creating a rich and complex visual narrative that transcends the boundaries of any specific artistic movement. A curious fact about this painting is that Renoir completed it in 2 phases separated by several years, allowing the viewer to directly observe the evolution of his technique and approach. This detail makes The Umbrellas a unique testimony to the artist's versatility and genius, as well as a fundamental piece for understanding his artistic legacy. Number 4. La Grenouillère. From 1869 to 1869 AD, La Grenouillère, created in 1869, captures the effervescence of an iconic place for 19th-century Parisians, the floating spa of Croissy-sur-Seine. In this painting, Renoir immortalized the spirit of recreation and leisure that characterized the French bourgeoisie during this period. La Grenouillère was a popular summer destination, and Renoir, along with Monet, chose it as a subject to explore the possibilities of light and water, essential elements of Impressionism. The composition is notable for its dynamic use of color and light reflected off the water. Renoir used rapid, overlapping brushstrokes to capture the constant movement of the boats, figures, and ripples on the river's surface. The contrast between shadows and light reflections gives the scene a sense of vitality and transience. This work exemplifies the Impressionist desire to capture a precise moment in time, in all its imperfection and beauty. In Renoir's career, La Grenouillère represents a key moment in his collaboration with Monet, as both artists worked together in this place, sharing ideas and techniques that would define the Impressionist movement. The work not only stands out for its artistic quality, but also for its historical value as a testimony to a friendship and creative exchange that revolutionized art. An interesting detail is the way Renoir uses foliage and branches to frame the scene, directing the viewer's gaze towards the bustle of the seaside resort. This compositional approach adds depth and dynamism, allowing the viewer to immerse themselves in the atmosphere of joy and carefreeness that characterized La Grenouillère. Number 3. The Great Bathers. From the year 1887 to the year 1887 AD. The Large Bathers, completed in 1887, stands as a monumental work in Renoir's career, representing a significant shift in his artistic style. Influenced by classical art and the Renaissance, this painting reflects his transition to a more structured and meticulous approach to composition. Unlike his earlier works, here Renoir abandons loose brushstrokes and adopts a more rigorous technique, with defined contours and an attention to the modeling of the figures reminiscent of the great masters of the past. The scene depicts a group of women enjoying a bath in a natural setting. Renoir uses a more restrained palette compared to his Impressionist works, emphasizing earth tones and soft gradients. The arrangement of the figures evokes an almost sculptural harmony, with poses suggesting an intimate connection between the women and the landscape. This approach moves away from the typical spontaneity of Impressionism, giving way to a timeless atmosphere that seeks to capture the idealized beauty of the human body. This painting, although it received mixed reviews at the time, demonstrated Renoir's versatility as an artist and his ability to reinvent himself. It was seen as an homage to classical tradition, while also marking a different path within artistic modernity. His boldness in combining ancient influences with a contemporary sensibility cemented his position as an innovator in art history. A fascinating aspect of this work is the time and dedication that Renoir invested in its creation. For 3 years he worked tirelessly on this painting, perfecting every detail until he achieved the harmony he desired. The large bathers not only reflects a moment of artistic evolution, but also Renoir's commitment to his craft and his constant pursuit of excellence. Number 2. The Rowers' Luncheon. From 1881 to 1881 AD. The Luncheon of the Boating Party, completed in 1881, is one of the most iconic works of Impressionism and a faithful portrait of social life in 19th century France. Set on the terrace of the Maison Fournet's restaurant on the banks of the Seine in Chatou, the painting reflects the growing popularity of riverside strolls and outdoor life in a Paris celebrating its reconstruction after the conflicts of the previous century. Renoir captured a moment of relaxation and camaraderie in a setting where nature and architecture combine in perfect harmony. The composition of this work stands out for its richness of detail and its ability to interconnect the characters. Each figure in the painting seems immersed in a unique activity, creating a visual dialogue that reinforces the narrative. Renoir used a warm and luminous palette, with soft brushstrokes that suggest the texture of fabrics, the shine of glass, and the freshness of fruit. Shadows blend with light in a fluid manner, evoking the warmth of a sunny afternoon. This technical approach not only captures the atmosphere of the moment, but also the carefree spirit of the era. For Renoir, this painting represents a high point in his career, as it consolidated his signature style and allowed him to explore themes of social interaction and human connection. The inclusion of close friends as models added a personal and authentic dimension to the painting, showing not only his artistic skill but also his sensitivity to human nature. The work was received with great enthusiasm, establishing itself as a symbol of modern life and the transition towards a new approach to art. A curiosity about this painting is the depiction of Aline Cherigot, Renoir's future wife, who appears in the foreground playing with a dog. This detail, apparently casual, brings a touch of tenderness and realism that connects the viewer with the scene. The Luncheon of the Boating Party is not only a technical masterpiece, but also a testimony to the life and relationships that defined the artist's career. Number 1. Dance at the Moulin de la Galette. From 1876 to 1876 AD. The iconic painting, Dance at the Moulin de la Galette, created in 1876, reflects the vitality of Paris at the end of the 19th century. During this period, the city was consolidating itself as the cradle of art and modernity, with the Parisian bohemian scene immersed in an atmosphere of cultural transformation. The painting captures daily life in Montmartre, an area then known for its cafes, cabarets, and effervescent artistic spirit. Renoir, with his mastery, documented not only a moment of leisure and joy, but also an atmosphere of camaraderie and lightness that contrasted with the political and social upheaval of the 19th century. The painting is a sublime example of Impressionism, notable for its dynamic composition and masterful use of light. Renoir used loose brushstrokes and vivid colors to depict the interplay of sunlight through the leaves, creating a flickering effect on the figures and the ground. This technical mastery transforms the scene into a vibrant, ephemeral moment, a hallmark of the Impressionist movement. In addition, The painting features a carefully balanced composition where the characters, arranged in groups, generate a sense of depth and movement. Renoir paid particular attention to the details in the faces and attire, capturing the fashion and expressions of his time. This painting marked a milestone in Renoir's career for its ambition and scale. Unlike his previous works, here he tackled a larger canvas and a more complex composition, consolidating his reputation as one of the great masters of his generation. This work was also exhibited at the Third Impressionist exhibition, positioning itself as a key piece in understanding the rise and acceptance of Impressionism in art history. Its depiction of modern life resonated with both the public and critics, challenging the artistic canons of the time. An interesting detail about this painting is the depiction of Renoir's friends and acquaintances as models. This personal approach not only allowed him to capture a unique authenticity in expressions, but also to immortalize a social circle in which creativity and innovation converged. Renoir thus manages to transcend time, allowing today's viewer to experience a Sunday at the Moulin de la Galette with the same intensity as almost 150 years ago. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.